Please welcome to the stage Anil Dash, MC for Mozilla Festival 2025.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are back for one final debate for Mozilla Festival. This is one I'm very excited about, a topic that is something I'm obsessed with, which is systems. We are going to be asking to unlearn not just narratives or policies, but the thing that underlies those things, which is systems in their entirety. From indigenous knowledge or alternative economies, this debate is actually going to engage with whether we can unlearn the extractive systems that we've inherited and whether we can imagine something that's a little bit more balanced, a little bit more humane. So the voices that we brought on board are the right people to actually engage us with that conversation. Joining us are going to be Keoni Mahelona, who's the CTO at Te Hiku Media, as well as Luisa Franco Machado, who's the founder of Equilabs. And our moderator for this conversation is going to be Shai Akiwowo. Will you please join me in welcoming them to the stage?
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited about this conversation on systems thinking and how we begin to unlearn. I'm really excited to have Keoni and Louisa join us. They'll introduce themselves in a moment, but what I thought might be helpful to set the scene is talking about the importance of unlearning. I wrote a book called How to Stay Safe Online a few years ago, and it's about having a conversation with ourselves about our relationship with technology as a system and also our bodies as systems and the intel that it brings. And in chapter 8 of my book, I bravely talk about being a dickhead. I talk about the mistakes and the reflections of my journey so far. And there's a sentence here that I think that might help ground us. In the spirit of raw honesty and transparency that has shaped this book and my expertise, I couldn't end without sharing my mistakes and reflections. Social media wants us to put on a happy face and share our highlights, propping up the dangerous narrative of perfectionism. Dangerous because as humans, we're not perfect, nor should we feel the pressure to be. Learning and unlearning and making mistakes are important to highlight. We should all be encouraged to share and wear the badge of being a recovering dickhead with pride. But that's what life is all about. There's no end goal. Rather, it's a series of lessons that lead to change. This principle is particularly important when heading up organizations or running a campaign. It's only through learning that we can be truly inclusive, and it's this principle we need in our online spaces, even more so to counter the algorithms exploiting our outrage and emotions. So, Keoni, I'm going to come to you first. How has your journey of unlearning brought you here? We talked before about being children of immigrants and the idea of the American dream. For us, it was being a lawyer or a doctor. And you, after getting your degree, decided not to go to Silicon Valley and you took another path. Can you share more about your journey of unlearning that's brought you here?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. I was thinking how best to introduce myself, and thank you for asking that question because it works great with what I want to say.
Thank you.
Before I was in high school, before my sister and I were both in high school, I remember a day where we said to one another, we're going to work really hard, go to school, get a good education, so we can make a lot of money, so we could build a house for our parents. Because we grew up in a shack. It wasn't really a shack, but we called it a shack. It wasn't your typical American home. Grew up in Hawaii. We had a generator for electricity, et cetera, et cetera. But to reflect on that as kids, like not even in high school, to say, this is the reason why we're going to live that American dream of get a good job, make a lot of money. It's not like for ourselves. It was for our parents. And I think to be that young and for your parents to get you to think that way, I think is a real testament to a good job that my parents did and the love they must have had for us at that time. And I think that's really shaped how who I've become in terms of the decisions that I've made. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't know that what you do after engineering school is go to Silicon Valley. So I just want to be honest about that. I mean, I saw my classmates go, to the Bay Area, work for Google, and make quite a lot of money. I didn't know that's what you were supposed to do. I somehow missed that boat, and I'm so glad that I did. But it took me a long time to realize that the grass actually wasn't greener on the other side. Because even in New Zealand, when during the hard times, I was like, I could have gone to Silicon Valley and made a lot of money. And then my friends, one of who's here, they're saying like, oh my God, your life is so amazing. You live in New Zealand and da-da-da-da, like the valley's like really not that great and da-da-da-da. And I didn't believe them. But now, because I guess I stuck with my values and making decisions, now in hindsight, I made the right decision. And I feel privileged, to be honest. Privileged that I can work for an amazing organization, work for an amazing community, do something that is technically challenging, that like gets us to really think hard and still and do good and not be driven by returning profits to shareholders. I feel so privileged that I get to do this, and I wish more people had that privilege.
Thank you so much. We want to hear more about your work and the work that your organization does in a moment, but I'd like to bring Louisa in to answer the question, how has the journey of unlearning, particularly ageism, brought you to the work that you've been doing and Mozfest today?
Hi everyone, so happy to be here and thank you so much for bringing your energy. I hope that our energy can also help you guys finish this beautiful journey of unlearning. And I am a young person, and I think in a lot of these spaces we don't see many young people because we're usually seen as sort of the next generation. We're seen as the future we're building for. But what do these so-called future generations actually want? And understanding that there was this sort of disconnect between the futures that were being built for us with what we actually want out of our lives, our present lives, and what we think we can also build for others and for ourselves. That's what really brought me here. It was really a journey of knocking doors and saying, hey, I think that you're missing this perspective. Are you open to hearing it? And I think that this was something that, showed me the power also of intergenerational learning, right? Because I wouldn't be here if someone or some people from older generations didn't believe that young people also deserve to be heard. So this process of unlearning ageism and becoming empowered with the type of work that I do through Equilabs. Equilabs is a youth-led digital rights laboratory. So we are reimagining these futures that we're creating and empowering young people, building a movement, a youth-led movement for digital rights, which is something that I think we're all kind of craving a little bit, bringing some energy, bringing some hope maybe to what the digital age can look like. All of this has brought me to the seat with all of you and all of you.
Thank you so much. Keoni, when we think about systems thinking, in my perspective, we should be thinking about the politics of domination. So what supremacy, particularly white supremacy, has conditioned us to believe. And that has then had an intersection with other systems. So time, our bodies, family, and land. Being from Hawaii, one of the things that you said that was just so easy for you, but was such an epiphany for me, was the spirit of abundance because of your connection to land. Could you talk about why the importance of the connection to land has meant that you've taken the approach that you are going to use AI to preserve language and Indigenous knowledge?
Yeah, being able to call someplace home is really, I think it's important for everyone. A lot of Indigenous people were literally just picked up and ripped off their homes, and in some case shaken and thrown back down into reservations, into Hawaiian homes in Hawaii. And that removes so much. It removes a sense of security, a sense of identity. Our cultures and our languages evolved from the lands we grew up in. for generations, and we've been removed from that. But I guess growing up with my father, he instilled in me that, you know, at the end of the day, if I failed in life, I could always come back home, and I could live off the land. I could go and hide in the bushes, I guess, and escape from society and survive. It would be a very selfish thing to do, but if I failed in life, meaning like if I didn't get a good job, I presume, like whatever failure is defined as in a Western sense, I could go back home to Hawaii. But not many people have that security. You know, it's like when we talk about entrepreneurship, right? Like who are the entrepreneurs? It's people who can take financial risk. I could not take financial risk. My parents had very little money. You know, to the point where my sister and I were like, we're going to get good jobs so we can build a house for our parents. So there was no way we were going to have the privilege to take those financial risks. But I had a different sort of, I guess, privilege, right? Something to fall back on, knowing that I guess I had my family and I had my people, and in a sense we had our land. I mean, under you know, American occupation, we still are in Hawaii and we still live there, and so that I guess was enough for me to feel grounded and to still be able to take some risks, like, you know, in my career and what I wanted to do. So. And
then that your risk was moving to New Zealand?
No, that was my dream. No, I was kidding. Literally my dream. I dreamt about it, but no.
Well, that's important to talk about, right?
Well,
the importance of dreaming, right, and manifestation, and as a technology in itself, right? To think about what success means, then, you know, looking at LinkedIn and looking at people's CVs and like, okay, this is my career path and journey.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was going to go to MIT, and I applied to MIT and Stanford and this crazy place called Olin. You know, I got into all of them. I didn't know where to go. I literally flipped a coin one day, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to Olin. But then as I was like doing something else and actually thinking on it, I was like, no, this is the right decision. But I needed a sign, I guess, from my environment that was the right decision, and flipping a coin at the time is the thing that, I don't know, reaffirmed taking a risk. I mean, I took a risk on going to Olin. A lot of us took a risk on going to Olin, look at my classmate over there, rather than going to MIT, you know, where it was a traditional engineering education, but this was like a project-based, team-based. We were part of the second graduating class. They were reinventing the engineer. They were unlearning how to teach engineering, actually, when you think about it. This is in the year 2007. So, and to be honest, I don't think I would have been on the path that I am today if I hadn't taken that particular risk. But there was a financial safety net that came with that Olin in the early years. I mean, my parents had no money, so I couldn't get federal aid because Olin wasn't accredited yet. But Olin had a big trust fund, so we were all on full scholarship. So I didn't have college debt. So there's another privilege that I didn't have any college debt coming out of college, which is, I mean, it's unheard of these days, unless, you know, you're super wealthy.
I mean, hopefully we have some time to talk about philanthropy and funding, because I know Lewis has got some thoughts on that. But Keoni, staying with you for a moment longer, the work that you do with Maori Indigenous communities to preserve language and knowledge, do you want to talk to why personally that was important for you to be a part of? And just to give you a hint of what we need to talk about from earlier, the thing about the stars.
Oh, right, yeah. Māori and Hawaiian were very similar. I mean, we essentially come from the same place. Pacific peoples are very similar. Languages are very similar. Cultures are very similar. I mean, I had a dream that I met someone in Aotearoa, and that's why I went there and studied. And I did meet that person, and we have a beautiful baby now, and we work together in the work that we do. That's another story for another time, not for this
You didn't tell me that.
That's all right. But my partner essentially said, you know, we need help at our organization. We need a website. And, you know, I can build a website, right? It's what you learn in engineering school. It's not what you learn in engineering school, by the way. But it wasn't what we had to do that wasn't important at Te Hiku Media. It's like, it's not just about building a website. It's like, how do you do this right? Because we were talking about taking our native speaker recordings, audio recordings, interviews, our stories, our cultural knowledge, putting it on the web. What you did at the time was you put your stuff in YouTube or SoundCloud, and you build a WordPress site, and you link those videos. This is what small to medium-sized media companies did in the day. But because sovereignty was so ingrained in me as a native Hawaiian and our organization as a Māori organization, we knew that's not what you do with cultural content that is so valuable. And we knew the value of the data that were in these stories. So I said, oh, we'll just make our own YouTube or whatever. It was not quite a YouTube, but I mean, we built our own platform from the ground up. It was the harder thing to do. We didn't have any money to do it, but it was the right thing to do. And I could do it. And so, and that's what we did. And that was the genesis of us making AI machine learning. That's why we got into machine learning, is all of a sudden we had like thousands of hours of Te Reo Māori speech, and we wanted to transcribe it because we wanted to enhance access to the language through this digital medium. And if we could transcribe it, we can do all sorts of cool things. That took so long. So again, Siri is on my phone. The technology exists to do speech transcriptions. Surely we could teach computers to speak Te Reo Māori. So I guess it's, for us, no one was ever going to build those tools for our languages because there's not enough money to be made. But we saw the opportunity in building it for ourselves. We had a need, and we saw the need in our communities to have these technologies. So we just decided, okay, we're going to do it ourselves. But don't get, like, it's not easy. Like the fact that, you know, I had the privilege of having a good engineering degree. The fact that Te Hiku Media built trust in the community. Te Hiku Media was formed in 1990, before Facebook and YouTube and all these companies. We had decades of trust in the community and a treasure trove, and we call it a taonga, of data. Like we were well placed to actually build these models because we had high quality data, we had experts of that data, and we had a few people who actually knew something about writing code. And so there's all these things, the stars aligned. I know that's not the story you wanted me to tell, but I'll just cut to the chase. The story she wants me to tell is, so in 1975, the Hawaiians sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti on a traditional voyaging canoe, a double-hulled canoe, without the use of any technology. They used the stars to guide them. They used the waves. They used the birds. This was traditional knowledge that was lost because of colonization. And the Hawaiians actually went to Micronesia to learn that knowledge. And the people in Micronesia fought over whether they should or shouldn't give this knowledge back to the Hawaiians. And Maupia decided, because he saw that the next generation there, they didn't want to learn traditional navigation. They wanted to go and get a Western job. So he says, well, if my own children and grandchildren don't want to learn this, and the Hawaiians are coming to me asking me, to learn it, of course I'm going to teach it to them. And the Hawaiians, I mean, they did this as part of our Renaissance, but we were also proving, like this white guy, I don't know if you guys know the story of Kon-Tiki, some white academic who essentially said, the Polynesians didn't sail across the Pacific, they floated on rafts. Because there was this argument that, like, how did the sweet potato get to the Pacific? Because sweet potatoes from South America. So I guess it floated on a raft. Anyway, so this white dude, like, literally builds a raft, sets off from Chile, and, like, doesn't actually make it to Hawaii, and they had to rescue him. It was total bonkers. But I mean, this is the science that has been happening for centuries. Sorry, anyways, another topic to unlearn. But the whole point of that was bringing back our traditional knowledge. And in that case, we had lost it. But there was a similar culture that was willing to share that knowledge back with us so we could help reclaim it and we can help revitalize that. And so me going to Aotearoa I'm not Māori. My partner's Māori, my baby's part Māori. But it's us sharing what we have to help bring back what was taken from us. And so in the same ways that the Micronesians helped us to regain traditional, voyaging, I'm there as a Hawaiian helping Māori to build these technologies. And finally, as of this year, we're now going back to Hawaii to help the Hawaiians build these technologies. And just because I'm a Hawaiian, it doesn't mean I can go back to Hawaii and make these technologies, because I haven't lived in Hawaii for more than 20 years. What gives me the right to make the decisions for the Hawaiian language movement in Hawaii? I have no right. I have no privilege to do that. I have to respect those who've been doing it for decades. I'm a blip in time. It just so happens AI is here, and we're still trying to save our languages, so I'm going to use AI to do it. But I'm not going to forget the people who marched to ensure that our languages were official languages in our country, who started the Kohanga movement, who helped to bring our languages back to where they are today. I'm just like a small person in this multi-generational journey for the sovereignty of our people.
You see why I said to talk about the stars? You see?
Thank you.
Talking about another star, Louisa, your journey into digital rights, from a youth perspective, we had an interesting conversation. We've got 7 years difference between us, but somebody who's born in 1991 is more respected than somebody who's born in 1998. And the argument you're making is that the age shouldn't define competence. Could you talk more about that, and also how, as a young person, you are redefining what success is, because you are not going through the status quo of education, doing student politics. You know, you're doing UN, you're doing EU, right? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting unlearning that we have to do of what does it mean to be competent? What does it mean to be an expert in something? And I think we usually tend to sort of, you know, the traditional structures and the structures of hierarchy and age, and, you know, you would trust a company CEO who is usually older, who, you know, is usually from similar demographics, like the old white men we're always talking about, but they are the majority right now. And that's the people we have learned to respect. We have learned to see these people as more respectable, worthy of trust, worthy of responsibilities. And whenever I come to, you know, places where I'm like discussing with people what it means to be a young leader, I see a lot of, you know, almost a prejudice in the way that people sort of see youth leadership. Because whenever I'm talking about, well, young people want to be in decision-making spaces, we want to be also, you know, making the decisions that are going to affect our lives and other people's lives. And then the argument I always hear is, oh, but there's not enough capacity, there's not enough expertise, there's not enough experience. But at the same time, a lot of people in power are using young people to do their work as well. They have their interns writing their policy reports, you know, they have their junior advisors doing all the research they need. They actually have young people as the backbone of their structures, except that we don't get recognized for that. And then we don't get trusted into spaces that would actually allow us to be the people that can be trusted, the people that do have the expertise and the capacities. So one thing that I have learned founding an organization is that, well, when you need to learn something, you do. Just like everyone from any generation, whenever you're starting a new job, you have to learn a bunch of things that you didn't know before. And I think that a lot of times youth is kind of seen as kind of important or interesting to humanize processes, to sort of help you connect with energy, but then as soon as it gets to the point of let's make a decision, now it's kind of like, well, now it's the adults table. And then we'll let the kids to the kids table. And there's so much that we lose in this process that is fueled with prejudice, with systems we have learned, systems of ageism, of hierarchies, of who is trusted to make decisions. And especially in the spaces I'm at, which is sort of the United Nations, governments, when policies are being defined and they're going to be affecting hundreds, thousands, millions of people, then how come we only have people from a certain experience that are making the decisions for everybody else? And I know this can apply to so many other instances and so many other groups that are historically excluded from these spaces. But I think that the conversation on sort of youth agency kind of got a little bit behind. I think everyone is becoming or is aware of the importance of diversity, of having more women in power, more people of color in power. I think that we're sort of getting there, but when it comes to youth, I think a lot of us still hold so many prejudices. So I think this experience of starting an organization and starting a movement has made me realize that actually young people are so competent. We just don't have the space to thrive. And we're sort of kind of in boxes, we're boxed into this or that. And you can't be both an advisor and an activist. You kind of have to choose. And that sort of alienates young people from processes that are impacting our lives as well. That's why I'm always talking about what kind of digital futures we're creating if no one from these futures are part of it. So I think that these systems of unlearning hierarchies and ageism actually connects to so many other oppressive systems that we see in society, and everything is connected at the end. So I think that there's so much to reflect on that.
Thank you so much. I have a challenge, given it's a debate. I have done all your youth stuff. Yeah, I've been the youngest mayor, the youngest councillor, set up my organisation Glitch when I was 27 years old. I have done youth parliament. I have campaigned on votes reducing to 16, 17, and I am now 35, grieving the loss of play and creativity and parts of my childhood. And that is compounded with being a black woman, where adultification is something that we have to go through at early ages, not like my white counterpart. So is there something about getting the balance right, where youth are heard and respected, but not at the jeopardy of that sweet moment of play, creativity, making mistakes, fucking up, not having to worry that they're at a club and someone's taking a phone, is that gonna go online, they're gonna ruin their career for the rest of their life? Is that sometimes a bit too young?
This reminds me when I was, I think, about 10 years old or 12 years old, and my dad would always tell me this. He would always be like, oh, but I know you want to grow up. I know you want to be a teenager, but enjoy your childhood, because I miss my childhood so much, and you want to grow up so fast. And I would tell him, Dad, that's not what I want right now. I want people to respect me. I want to have agency. I want to be able to decide what I'm doing. And of course, saying this from a place of a 12-year-old child who just saw the world and really wanted to go discover it. And I think that what I've been doing in my work, and what I see a lot of other young activists doing, is literally redefining what it means to be successful and what sorts of structures of respectability we have built. And that allows for play to come in. So there are so many people I work with, and we work together in the morning, and then we go clubbing in the evening, and then we do stupid things that young people do, and that's okay. That is allowed.
Is it allowed? How are you facing scrutiny? The fear of being cancelled is real. And people being cancelled is real. Are you able to just while out, do your own thing, YOLO, or do you fear the scrutiny of being young and not able to make mistakes?
I think that there's two things at play here. I think one is the sort of age of social media, where as a Gen Z person, a lot of our social circles are on Instagram and TikTok. That's how we make friends. That's how we build community. That's how we build movements. So it's almost impossible to be outside of these same structures that are then oppressing us, both through scrutiny, but also through algorithms and shadow banning. I know a lot of young activists, but just activists in general, have been shadow banned countless times. I have, for posting about politics. And I think that there's this sort of a paradox where we depend on these structures, but at the same time, everything we do there is up for scrutiny. So every post you do, every picture you share, and I see a lot of actually young people retracting. They're not posting on social media, but they're consuming content. So it's not from this kind of not posting, not being part of this social media, doesn't necessarily come from this place of rebellion. I'm going to rebel against.
It's censorship.
Yeah, it's self-censorship
It's
in a way.
self-censorship, which is then having an impact on creativity because of perfectionism, right? And so how do we en masse therefore create a culture that it's okay to be human? Anyone want to answer that question?
I think we also have to understand that there are some, I think before we used to have this idea of what it's okay to say in public space, right? Because I see sometimes this argument of, oh, we can't talk about anything anymore, or everything gets canceled. And this sometimes comes from this place of wanting to share mean comments on the internet, and it's not the case, but that's the spaces I've heard that sort of argument. And then it's, well, some things maybe you shouldn't be sharing online, honestly, because that's making the internet worse for everybody else. I think that the problem here is who's deciding this scrutiny. It's not some sort of governing participatory body, as we all know. It's social media companies that want to make profit, sometimes out of hate. And then these policies decide what is okay to stay online and what is going to be deleted or
is it social media? And I'm not defending them. Is it social media that is creating vigilante culture? Is it social media that is creating us versus them? Or is it the fact that as society we don't have accountability structures, and the way that we think we need to do accountability is punitive, and it needs to be punishing people, and it needs to be like to the point that they are beating, and they're like, oh my God, no, like we want you here, we love you. But it's you talked about that public shaming is probably the worst type of accountability.
No, it was being banned from a community.
Yeah,
because if you don't belong, then you're pretty much on your own, I guess.
And that's the biggest fear, right?
Yeah, that was some traditional punishment. It wasn't like hanging or throwing rocks. It was banning them from your community, and then they kind of lived as a loner. Yeah, and then they didn't have a community to belong to. Like, that was the worst thing that could happen to you. Yeah.
And how much is part of systems thinking about unlearning our relationship with fear?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question.
You made a fearless decision, right? Moving to New Zealand.
No, that wasn't fearless. That was easy. I mean, Māoris and Hawaiians were alike,
That's so interesting, your perspective on what you think is fearless, but to somebody else would be like, New Zealand is the other side of the whole world. Like, I'm going to be separated from my family. That's going to be really hard.
I wanted to go as far away from the shack as I could. Remember? I mean, I went to boarding school for high school. I loved it. We wanted to go to boarding school earlier because you could start at 7th grade. And I remember telling my parents, like 10 or 12, you are so inconsiderate. I didn't even know if I know what the word meant. I said, they're inconsiderate because they forgot to turn in my application to go to boarding school. And it wasn't until, it was the 9th grade that I finally, I actually didn't get in. I didn't get in. Some kids got kicked out of the dorm for smoking pot, and then I got in. So that's a whole nother story. But then it wasn't until later that my dad told me, or told us, it was like, he didn't want to lose his kids. Why does he want us to go away and go to boarding school? He'd get 2 more years with us. I'm going to have that. And that's what he did. And I see that now, and I realize that now, why he made the decision he made. And I mean, I was fine. I didn't have to go during that time. I really wanted to, but I was not able to make that decision for myself at that age. And it was my father's decision to make, and I'm glad that he did it.
I'm going to switch gears as we've only got 12 minutes left.
Yeah, it's not much.
Not much left to talk about other systems of unlearning. Time. How has your relationship with time, Louisa, changed since you've been in leadership positions, having to think vision 5 years' time, but then also having to lead people who need to catch up, and also wanting to not replicate the same structures and infrastructures? Can you talk more about your relationship with time and how that's maybe impacted infrastructure building for you?
I think my personal relationship with time is so specific because I think that sometimes I have this almost time blindness in a way that everything seems possible.
I call it time dysmorphia. Google tells me I can get somewhere in 12, I'll do it in 10.
Yeah, and you know, it can be really hard in some instances of life, for sure, but also it has allowed me to sort of deconstruct things that can happen at the same time. So I think that thinking about the systems and the structures we have learned to live with, everything is timed. So you're a child, and then you do child things, and then you're a teenager, and then you are being rebellious, and then you become an adult, and then is when you get responsibilities and you get boring and life gets boring, and then that's how we learn how to
think life's boring.
deal with time. I'm glad.
I'm excited for my 40s.
I'm really glad.
Yeah.
But I think that as a society, we sort of like thought that that was how time goes, right? And I'm really glad you're unlearning that as well. And that's something I am also, thinking. I'm like, well, I guess there are some adult things I do. I say this all the time. I'm like, oh my God, this is so adult. I'm like, this is crazy. But then at the same time, I'm also doing teenage stuff. There is this sort of meme and joke that a lot of young people lost a lot of like their teenage years or their young adulthood with the pandemic, where we were locked up for 5 years. So it's like these memes of like acting 25 when I'm 30 because I was locked up for 5 years. So it's this kind of idea.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, we have that same thing in the gay community. Like, if a gay man comes out like post 40, they relive their their 20s because they didn't get to have that. I mean, yeah, we experienced that. But let's get like debatable here, because we were all young once. We weren't all Indigenous once. We weren't all Black once, right? We weren't all yeah. You go on. So, I mean, and then I want you to talk about, because you mentioned to me being on, is it the UN AI panel, right? And how there's no youth representation, and you really wanted to be there, right? Can you just quickly like explain that situation?
Well, I mean, the UN and sort of these international bodies have many sort of like the UN AI advisory board,
right?
And there's no young people there advising the AI.
Are there Indigenous people there?
I don't think so either.
Right.
I think that there is some attempt to bring in more nationalities, but I don't think that this is dismantling the systems of oppression.
Have you worked in AI?
Yes, I have. I have 2 master's degrees. I've been working on AI policy in the Global South
policy,
for the past...
specifically.
Yeah, AI policy. So not building AI, but governing AI, building regulation that makes AI trustworthy and inclusive, and bringing all that space into how governments do AI policies, what kind of projects international organizations can do, how can...
So your value add is that you're bringing that, but from a youth perspective.
Yeah, I think that, I come from a generation, I'm Gen Z, I come from a generation where we're much more sensitive to a lot of the oppression that is happening around us, and not just being sensitive, but not being afraid to name it, to name the systems of racism, of capitalism, of homophobia, sexism that are ruling us, which I think many of us are aware of, but when it comes to board meetings or decision making or UN, no one is actually naming it because it has become almost a taboo. And I think that that's what my generation is bringing to these spaces, this awareness and not being afraid to say, okay, these are the issues. How are we going to work together to solve them?
So for us in New Zealand, nobody knows us. Journalists in New Zealand are putting people on pedestals whose only experience with AI is writing blogs, sometimes writing blogs about us. We're not seen as... I don't see myself as an expert in AI, but when I see the people who are being put on these panels to represent Māori, so we have Māori representation in Aotearoa, they don't actually have the timed experience in AI. They haven't worked in AI. They read about it and talk about it and blog about it. They're not writing code. They're not sweating their asses off trying to collect data to build a corpus to say the language. They're not there in the community, working with the community, doing the hard work, yet they're put on the pedestal to represent all of us. And so I think that's another thing that, and even going on here, it's right, whose voice is being heard today? I mean, we had this discussion, a great discussion, so great that Mozilla made space, to talk about the misgendering. But like that, that is one of so many of us being discriminated in so many ways. But who of us actually gets to be heard? I mean, you were able to insert yourself onto this panel as a youth and used the confidence that you had to be here. And like, I applaud you for doing that. I thought I was on a panel with like an Indigenous people talking about Indigenous issues. And Indigenous people are very often like, we're at the bottom of the totem pole, as an African woman had to say on mainstream TV. In America, like in terms of rights, there's so many other marginalized groups in America who have rights far above what Native Americans have. And I want to bring, this is the system that I navigate daily in the decisions that I make when we're collecting data, when we're going to our community, when I have to talk to our elders. I mean, for me to be on a panel with Uncle Larry, who is 80 years old and has worked his life, saving our language, to talk about AI, I said, Uncle, I don't feel like I deserve to sit next to you on a panel. But he feels exactly the opposite. I'm not a youth, but I mean, to him I am, right, with this 40-year gap. And he's respecting me by saying, absolutely, you should be here, and you should sit with me, and we should have this discussion.
Are we saying that maybe we need to start unlearning representation politics? And we need to start unlearning identity politics, that just because you can tick something on a census box of a community, that in itself means that you've got the expertise or the lived experience to be on stages or spaces and speaking on behalf of people.
But here's the hard thing, right? And exactly that. But like, we've made this mistake as well. Like, if you're the only Indigenous person here, and there's a few of us, there's all of a sudden, like, you're the expert on Indigenous. I'm no expert on Indigenous issues. I can talk about the things that I do, like day to day, and the work that I do, and I'm confident, but I don't speak on behalf of all Indigenous peoples. But often we're in these situations where we're the one minority, and we're sometimes wrongly put on a pedestal. We actually made this mistake at our organization. Actually, I made this mistake because there was a young Māori who wanted to work for us, and I actually knew it would be better for a data scientist. It would be better for his data science career to go and work for the non-Māori organization. But where I failed him is that it would have been better for his career as a Māori in data science to work for us. And he's made mistakes. He's made bad mistakes that you cannot walk back from. And I feel like I failed him by doing that. But that's the issue, because I took this young Māori in his 20s, a degree in math, data scientist, and put him in a data science company, a white male-run company, and he was their tick box. They put him on a pedestal to represent their organization. All of a sudden, he's now the Māori expert on data science and machine learning.
And I think that we are creating these problems. Like, why are you representing Indigenous people? Why am I representing young people? Because there are no other Indigenous people here, because there are very few young people here. So I think that that's part of the problem, right? That we are put in this pedestal. Even, young people, that's such a broad qualification. There are young people in South Africa and
well, we had a discussion, right? Because the UN definition of young is 30, but in the EU is 35.
Yeah, so
Gosh.
I think it's unlearning like what it actually means to like.
And also, why does that matter? Why does the identity of which we have seen through the oppressive lens now be something that we see as a badge of getting us into rooms, rather than the expertise that, despite the oppression, we have learnt creativity, resilience, communities that are being underlooked, the way in which we can improve policy. Why is that not what we are offering in our CVs? Why is it the first black this, the first woman this? Why is that what we're leading with, the oppressive identity politics, then the spirit and love and vision for liberation?
I think that the problem is that for so long, when we didn't consider these identities, everything was very white male washed. It was like, well, it's not because it's a white man, it's just because that's the most capable person to do this job. And it's always been a white guy that is the most capable person. But is that true? Is that always true? Obviously not. So I think that I see this, but I do think that we have to name these systems. We have to say, well, there is a patriarchal system that prevents women and gender minorities to be in decision-making spaces. So yes, we are not just that, but I think that that brings a lived experience that definitely dictates or inspires at least the work that we do. So of course, I never want to be seen as a youth expert. I'm not. I am an AI policy expert who is young, but I realized that being an AI policy expert and looking how I look, not just young, a young queer person from the global majority, that wasn't enough because my expertise was never considered enough because of what I look like. So I think that that's when identity come at play and say, well, I want to be respected for what I do despite what I look like, but because of what I look like, that's why I'm being excluded from these systems. So I think it's important to sort of keep this conversation open of what are the possibilities and how can we actually liberate ourselves from the systems that have been oppressing us for so long.
And I think that's the beauty of what intersectionality offers us, is understanding there's multiple parts of us than just one box.
Right.
We've got only 30 seconds left, and so thankfully we've practiced this question, guys, okay? The question is, how do we build the muscle for a broader church, understanding that we can hold multiple truths within ourselves, and we can also hold multiple, sometimes conflicting truths externally?
I just be respectful, I guess, and yeah, I don't know. That's a very complex question.
Yeah, you didn't do your homework.
No, I didn't do my homework. It's all these big words. I'm a hard worker. That's who I am, and I stick to the values. And when you stick to your values, you might make the hard decisions, and you might take the long path. But at the end of the day, when you look back on it, like they've never faulted us in our journey, and our journey's a long one. So as long as we stick to our values and continue the journey, knowing that it might take generations to achieve what we want to achieve, I think we'll be okay. It won't be the best, but we'll be okay.
Louisa?
I think for me, it's don't be afraid to support ideas you don't fully understand. You don't have to fully understand why we need youth representation in decision-making spaces. But you do need to trust that when you're investing us with your resources, with your funding, with your respect, with your expertise, that we're gonna do great work because of who we are. But we have to understand that we might not understand everything, but we have to trust that that's gonna work anyway.
Well, thank you so much for modeling that we don't always have to agree on things, that we don't always have to know the answer, but we can be willing to go on a journey of unlearning and learning with each other. Can you please join me in thanking Keoni and Louisa, and thanking yourselves for watching us. All right.
I think we have questions.
Oh, did not read that. We have time for questions.
Oh, I had to go.
Should we ask someone who? Yes, there's two mics there. There's one there and one there. If two people want to get up, we can make some time for some questions. Go on. I see your hand. Please go.
Thank you very much for a great panel. I have a couple of questions to one panelist each. So my first question is to Louisa. So where I come from, which is in Eastern Europe, in the election rounds that we had in the past few years, the far-right, very dangerous far-right ideologies are actually very highly voted for in the 18 to 25 age group. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on that? The fact that this isn't just in Poland, for example, that we're seeing this pattern. In the UK, I think those ideas are also really popular amongst this age group. So considering, I'm assuming you work with young people a lot and with Gen Z, so what are your thoughts on that kind of radicalization of youth, and how do we combat that as this specific community that's around the internet and digital rights and AI? And my second question, if I may, is to Keoni, which is, could you tell us a bit more about what can we learn when it comes to data stewardship and knowledge stewardship from the Indigenous communities that you work with? Thank you.
Thank you for two great questions.
I think that this is a really important conversation that we have to have about this disconnect between young women and queer people and young men. And that has been fostered by social media, a lot of times social media polarization, where we see a generation where a lot of young women have come with contact with feminism, with empowerment, this whole language on empowerment and, you know, becoming better version of ourselves. And that also, you know, understandably so, took us away from conversations with young men, because we're like, we don't have to teach you. You have the resources to understand why this is a problem. We're not going to use our emotional labor, which is something that our moms and our grandmas have been doing for most of their lives. And that has created exactly this disconnect. But that's also fostered by social media algorithms and echo chambers that also send us to different rabbit holes in the internet. So we also have to understand that a lot of the polarization and social struggles we're dealing with, they are artificially created. And if they are artificially created, how can we then advocate for systems that sort of bring us back together? And we didn't have a lot of time to talk about polarization, but I think that we do need to find more intersections of our work and our values, but also if we are all the time put against each other because rage generates more clicks on Instagram, we're never gonna get into a place of connection, right? So I mean, I come from a policy perspective, so that's my 2 cents.
May I quickly add to this question? Working on social trends, particularly on TikTok, what's interesting is with the trad wives, for example, which is a very interesting. If anyone's in London on the 8th of December, the London Observatory are holding a very fascinating roundtable around the trad wives. For those that don't know, trad wives is like a hashtag that for some people it's their belief that they want to be a traditional conservative wife. And for some people, they're using that to monetize, which is basically in contradiction with the whole trad wife culture. But it's fascinating because actually it's seen as a resistance to capitalism. That actually in itself of like, I don't want to be a girl boss. I don't want to have it all. I don't want to have to do self-service checkouts at supermarkets, plus pick up my kids, plus pay so much for nursery. I don't want to do that. And so there is a growing trend where people are saying, well, I'm going to opt out of this and I'm going to do a trad wife. And I think having the conversation is important to get that nuance, which is what lived experience and intersectionality does bring to the table. But I unfortunately think that this binary of youth, black, white, and all of that has just meant that we're not having nuance. We're having identity politics. Your question, you were given data stewardship.
You got to respect the data. I mean, Indigenous people looked after the land because if you look after the land, it'll look after you. Likewise, we looked after our traditional knowledge, our genealogies, our data, because if we look after those things, they will look after us. And so we treat data as a taonga, as a treasure. We respect it. We're guardians. We don't own it. And I mean, it's not as simple as that. I mean, at the high level, like airy-fairy values way, it's as simple as that. But at the practical sense, it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's hard to implement those sort of systems. We have a license. We got lawyers to sort of embed our values in our actual legal document that people have to sign if they want to access some of our technologies. But we couldn't necessarily enforce it. I mean, well, we can try. But if someone's got a lot of money, then the law doesn't apply to them, right? So we're still mindful of the systems that exist. And then we make decisions around what we do with our data and how we look after our data based on, you know, who wants access or the system that we're putting it in. Because you know, if you put it online, anyone can access it and take it. But if we don't put it online, how are people going to access the language and listen to the great stories that we have on the radio? So,
It's the challenge with open source.
yeah, it's a challenge with open source, absolutely. I don't think it's good that no one really knows us and they can't really find us and they can't do language identification well, which means it'll be harder for them to hyper-target us to get at our data. But as soon as Facebook and OpenAI, these tech companies, can speak our languages better, sooner will they be able to hyper-target us for our data, to polarize us better, to scam us. And I mean, that's the real risk with the democratization of these technologies. It's not really democratizing them, it's just making them available to those who are already in power to use it to further divide us, to further get us here to fight one another about identity politics. And that's what they want. They want us to do that because it keeps them in power.
Yes.
Sorry, it was beyond the answer to the
Time
data
for
question.
one more question. There's a question in the corner. I think.
Okay. Oh, hold on. I'm incognito. Excuse me. Well, firstly, thank you for the great talk, and I have a question regarding Indigenous technologies and knowledge systems. And as a code artist, the more I learn about the true roots of computation, I learn that how indigenous they are, and how in opposition that are to the harms of big tech today. And I guess my question, when I see both the roots of computation and also some of the incredible technologies that are being built today by Indigenous technologists and young Indigenous young Indigenous technologists in particular, when it comes to language revitalization robots that are.
Does he know he's talking? Continue, please.
Yes, sorry. We can hear you, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me, white man, I'm speaking. Thank you. So, like generative AI, but in a way that is restorative, that revitalize Indigenous language and culture, that is very intentional, not just with the purpose, but everything. Danielle Boyosh-Scobots. I'm sure many people here know that. And just my question is, how can we help amplify that without, getting into the pitfalls of making Indigenous people and technologists more of a target for extractivism, big data?
Thank you, and sorry for the interruptions.
Those Indigenous communities need to possess and control those technologies. That's the only way we can do it safely. Despite actually building AI, machine learning models, I'm quite anti. I've never used ChatGPT. I'm not into using generative AI, and I disagree with some of my Indigenous colleagues around using these technologies because I don't trust them. I have zero trust for anything coming out of OpenAI. If you can run those models yourselves on your own hardware, then great. Yes, let's use it to try these Indigenous things. But these models don't think like us, and they never will, because they don't actually have our data, which is good, and we don't want them to have our data. So we need to come into a place where we can collectively, as Indigenous people, train our own LLMs from the ground up using only Indigenous data, and what might that look like? And then how do we share it just amongst Indigenous people and then fine-tune it for our own use cases? So there's so much outside having to come in to save us and do these technologies to civilize us, but let's instead empower ourselves and help to empower these communities to actually build their own models, to collect their own data, because I think that's the only way we can ensure the safety of those communities. So we don't allow anyone with a credit card to purchase our AI tools, because it's not Māori with a lot of disposable income. It's these scammers who are going to then use it to come after us. We have to have humans in the loop. You cannot scale this license model that we have. You need a human in the loop to actually see if this person is a legit person and is someone you're willing to work with who will follow the values of your license and then use your technologies. It's not going to scale, and it doesn't have to scale.
Thank you so much. We have to unlearn scale. We have to unlearn what growth means. We have to unlearn the discomfort also of being called in or called out because maybe times have also changed, and the discomfort of maybe not taking up space because there's always going to be relative privilege and oppression. And I think that's been a nice full circle of questions from the audience. So thank you very much, audience, and thank you again, Keoni and Luisa.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you for joining us. This is going to be our final session until 6:30 when we have our closing plenary, and we're going to have a special announcement from the Mozilla Foundation at that time, so you will definitely want to be back here for that. You got a break until then, so we'll see you at 6:30. Thank you all.